This is Pamela Riemenschneider. I'm the retail editor. How many times have I said that and I messed that up? For Blue Book Services, and this is the Purge Reporter Week in Review. Greg, what do we start with here? We got so much going on.
Well, we're a week out from the FPAA's Swipe Expo in Tucson, which we're both attending. So this will be in person, well, you and me at least, next week. But we'll talk about that next week.
Right, yeah, let's talk
Biggest
about that
story,
next week.
the biggest story has to be the McDonald's outbreak. And
Right.
CDC did confirm this week that they've identified onions as the likely source. And they've also identified a grower of interest in Washington, but did not name any names and did not confirm that it's onions. But based on how the market's reacting, I think the market's reacting like that's the source.
Right. In addition to the coverage that we had about Taylor Farms recalling onions from its Colorado facility, I also saw a bunch of stories about other restaurant chains pulling their particular onion that presumably was part of this Taylor Farms recall. The company did confirm that they were recalling onions. Um, I will say the one thing that I keep thinking about when I see this, and I'm sure that the investigation has a lot of moving parts, is that they oftentimes don't update and keep updated with some of this stuff, because I remember when we had with the cucumber outbreak back in the summer, and they said it was definitely the wastewater or the irrigation water, sorry, not wastewater, the irrigation water, and the Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association was like, whoa, hey, that was just, we're not sure that that's it. And then I don't recall ever seeing any kind of updates about definitive sources for that outbreak. So I do hope that we do get some answers. Although I will say, when we talk about food service onions and batching and lots and big chains like McDonald's, they have a pretty good handle on where something came from and when it came in the back room. And so one can only hope that this will go quickly and smoothly. Although I will note that the case count is up to 90 now. We'll keep our eye on it for sure.
Well, there's no way to segue away from an outbreak, so we'll just move on to other stuff. You had an interesting story on 7-Eleven this week, and it's in the news because the one right down the street from me is closing,
Well, yeah, I
which
mean,
they
we meant
briefly about closures in it, but the bigger story is a bigger emphasis on fresh.
right. So we had reporting, or just I had seen in my, news alerts that 7-Eleven was closing a bunch of stores, and I thought, that's weird. Because everything that I had heard was that they were in kind of a growth mode, although they were up for sale and they're still in negotiations for sale to Couche-Tard. And so that was interesting that sale originally fell through. There was billions of dollars back and forth on whether or not they're going to be acquired, but they had an investor relations meeting last week, and we're talking about their plans for growth. And I just clocked a picture in those presentations. Sometimes those presentations can be really detailed, and this one showed a picture of the kind of like, it looked like a fresh produce department, or even just like a reefer case that had fruits and vegetables in it. And it turns out that they are working on formats, and while they are closing 440 stores, they're planning to open another 500 under this new standard store, which has this little fresh food department, and then it also has an enhanced food service component to it. There's a couple of different restaurant banners that 7-Eleven has either acquired through acquiring a different convenience store chain. That would be the Laredo Taco one. But then they also have the Speedy Cafe and Raise the Roost chicken place. So they're adding 50 new restaurants to their existing stores. another 500 in this new format store that has more fresh food options. And it kind of looks like, because for folks that don't know, 7-Eleven is kind of like sometimes a gas station without gas in the US, is just what you had around the corner from you, with basically packaged food and munchy food, right? And big gulps. And that's pretty much it. But in other places in the world, and for example, they have, I want to get the presentation of their store count in the US is actually quite small compared to their global store count, because they have more stores in Japan than they have in the US. And in Japan, 7-Eleven is like fast food. It's like where you would go if you know, got late at night or something like that, and you want to have dinner, you would actually go to 7-Eleven and pick something out of one of their cases. And so I think they're trying to model that more and have more fresh food options and more food service options.
Well, that's what their competitors are already doing in the United States, and they tend to be more regional. But I mean, that is what we see, and we have regional C-store chains that are very well known for high quality food selection.
Right. So they're leaning into that, because when you think of 7-Eleven, I think of big gulps, and I think of like slushies, and I think of the
Well,
drink options.
Slurpees. Come on, let's get it right.
Slurpee, sorry, it's a Slurpee. I don't go to 7-Eleven, although I did go to 7-Eleven. I had to download their app, because that's the other thing that they're leaning into, is that they have a lot of rewards, and then the app-based ordering and the online ordering. They are already, I think, ahead of that than most convenience stores would be in the rewards options and stuff like that. They're leaning into that in the US. But I had to do that because they had an exclusive flavor of Gatorade that had extra dye in it that my kid wanted, for a soccer tournament. So we had to go 7-Eleven for the midnight whatever extra purple dye.
But that
7-Eleven.
that was a feature.
According to the kids, it's a feature. According
Extra
to the
purple
mom.
tongue.
Yeah, blue tongue, blue other things, right? So I just think that's interesting that they're taking that approach of the exclusivity of products, the loyalty, and also the food service angle, and then just that little produce department looking thing. It had salads and sandwiches. I put a photo on the story that I wrote, so you can check that out in the linked articles.
Fresh fruit, prominent in there. That's nice.
Definitely. And it wasn't a basket of Red Delicious apples and bananas, because that was the fun thing that Amazon opened a Amazon grocery concept adjacent to a Whole Foods in Chicago, right? They opened that a couple of weeks ago. And I was really curious about it, because I'm like, this is adjacent to a Whole Foods. What's it going to look like? It turns out, from what I read on LinkedIn, and I actually talked to someone who went to one in Chicago, and they said that when you go to a Whole Foods, you can't buy like Coca-Cola and Tide and like big brands of bad things that Whole Foods has determined are bad for you. But this Amazon grocery had a lot of those, but what it didn't have a lot of was fresh produce. That, like, in the pictures that I saw on LinkedIn, was the basket of Red Delicious apples that you think of when you think of, like, you know, the token effort for fresh produce. And I asked the person who shared those photos if they saw any other produce, and they said no, all I saw was this apple thing. And they did mention that, I mean, you could just go right upstairs and get everything that Whole Foods has. So, but I think it's interesting to try to tack on the bad for you stuff with the Whole Foods concept. I don't know. What are they doing?
Or so a well-balanced trip, you have to go to both, apparently.
Yeah, nobody's gonna do that.
Kind of inconvenient.
Kind of really inconvenient. It's different completely than a 7-Eleven store.
So how are consumers feeling about all this stuff? We had conflicting stories this week, actually. It was kind of weird. We had one story, actually last Friday we ran it, about a survey showing the majority of Americans struggle with grocery affordability. 70% in this study done by Swiftly said grocery affordability is a struggle, and it even is creeping into politics. We we don't have a whole lot of coverage, but next Tuesday, so by the time we record this next time, we will have had the election. But politics enters into the way people think about prices, according to this survey too. It said 75% of respondents believe the election outcome will directly impact everyday prices, and 68% said grocery costs and inflation are key voting factors for them. Those are awfully big numbers.
Yeah, they're awfully big. And actually, the one thing that I didn't look up in our little prep talk before we started this is the number of respondents in these surveys, because the Swiftly survey had 1,500 and the Consumer Confidence Survey is based on an online sample market research panel of over 36 million consumers. And I'm like, okay. I don't doubt at all that consumers are having trouble with grocery prices. And the funny thing is I'm seeing how this is playing out on social media. And social media can be just what do we call it? It's not an anecdote or anecdata, right? Anecdata
Yeah,
instead
right.
of anecdotal data. And what's going around on my TikTok feed right now, and I have reshared a lot of this stuff on my Produce with Pamela channel, talking about consumers showing their grocery hauls and what they're getting for the money. And it was spurred on by this one consumer who said, I spent $300 to $400 and this is all I got. And then everyone in the comments was like, just roasting this person because it's like 2 cases of Mellow Yellow and cases of pizza rolls and like all of this boxed food. The boxed food that we've been talking about that has had tremendous inflation, like ridiculous inflation in packaged goods. Chips are one of the things that have had the most inflation. Soda. It's not just the soda, it's the aluminum cans that has had a lot of inflation as well. And there's like 4 or 5 cans of Pringles and just garbage food. I'm being judgy. I'm like, she put herself out there on the internet to be judged. And let's
Pringles
say
aren't even potato chips.
they're not even a potato anymore. They do not count. Although I will say that my people like Pringles and I think they are an abomination. Pringles for me are like potato flakes at Thanksgiving. They're just not worth your time or your calories.
Which are part of those of some of those cheap Thanksgiving $5 per person. We ran the one this week and I saw it was potato flakes. Like
Yeah.
you're not saving a whole lot by not buying a bag of potatoes.
But what the heartwarming part of this for me out of this grocery debate is that I'm seeing people respond with their grocery hauls and saying, hey, I spent $200 on all of this at Aldi or whatever grocery store they go to. And the original poster, not one single fruit or vegetable. If there was one there, it might have been a hand of bananas. I did like the only frozen hash browns were the potatoes that this person had. And so all of these responses, and I actually had to show this to my 16-year-old last night when I was making dinner, because one of the responses was a grocery haul from an ingredient household. And my kids have been really upset lately because they're like, it's almost an insult for the kids to say, Mom, we're an ingredient household. Like it's a bad thing that we make all our food from scratch, and not all of our food comes from scratch. I mean, we have junk food in this house, right? We have packaged food. We have a balance of food, but they're mad because not our entire pantry is not full of the easy, quick stuff, I guess, that their friends are eating. And it's like, because I'm a thrifty shopper and ingredient household is the way to go, right?
Well,
This
not
is,
only that, but you control quality so much better when you're an ingredient household.
yeah.
You
And
know what's going into all those meals as opposed to when you're buying it packaged, you have to read the box.
right,
So
right.
that sounds to me more like a compliment than an insult. I think they're taking it the wrong way.
It's a compliment to me if someone said, "Oh, wow, we're an ingredient household." Yes, I know, I make everything from scratch. But when they're complaining that we have no snacks and they have to eat a handful of chocolate chips, it is an insult from the kids on the internet.
Have to eat
Have to.
chocolate chips.
Right? Like, I want a snack, mom. I'm like, well, we have all of this stuff. I list all the things that you can make as a snack, and they just, because it's not in a package ready to eat, then it's too difficult, and we're an ingredient house. And so it can be read as several different ways, but I'm showing him this video and I'm like, okay, look at the first person that had bagged pizza rolls, bagged frozen chicken fries. Chicken, he's like, what are chicken fries anyway? And I'm like, it's extruded chicken slurry in the shape of a fry, so you can dip it in sauce. We do not have that in this household. Right? And then to show him the other one that's like broccoli and eggs and all of the things that they bought to go along with that they're going to make meals from scratch. It also just kind of shows you it costs a lot of money to be unskilled in the kitchen. Like, and kitchen skills are something that we really need to emphasize to overcome some of these barriers to consumption.
That is a very diplomatic way of saying that.
Yeah. Well, it does cost a lot of money to not know how to cook or to not know how to do things or not to be lazy too, because honestly
Well,
it is.
that's the other side of it. It's not just not knowing, it's not caring.
Right. And
I'm
I'm
sure
trying,
there are very productive other things that those people are doing instead of cooking.
I'm sure there are, right? There's a lot of TikTok to be watched. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting when we've got this conference board with the consumer confidence and people's consumer confidence, that one of the write-ins did mention that grocery prices were coming down. And then the other one is like, it doesn't surprise me that consumers are struggling with grocery prices, especially if you are buying bags of extruded chicken slurry in the shape of dinosaurs or whatever. I'm going to judge you. Sorry. Not
Yeah,
sorry,
we have
really.
had CPI reports where there have been month over month decreases in certain categories, including fresh produce. But overall, it's not really accurate to say grocery prices are coming down. The rate of inflation is coming down.
Right.
Still on the rise, it's just much slower.
Right.
So I think some of this consumer confidence one that we've also had is consumers feeling better that the out of control inflation is under control, and
Right.
then coming to terms with, all right, this is the way it's going to be. At
Yeah.
least my TV's cheap.
Yeah, right. Anyway, we're gonna have to wrap this up. That's it. And we're gonna go home and I'm gonna go downstairs. Actually, that was another thing I made this week was the CPMA potato and leek soup. I went ahead and made that myself, and I will say that that was an extremely cost-effective meal. It was 4 potatoes and a cup of cream, like, and a leek and a couple of leeks. So I thought that was a little fun to get ready for the celebration for the 100th anniversary of the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. So you can check that out on our story or on my TikTok, either one. You don't have to have TikTok to watch TikToks. So that's it for the Produce Reporter Week in Review. If you are not getting the Produce Reporter newsletter, you need to go to producebluebook.com and sign up.